Hello, everybody. This is Paul Kostial with Curry Kostial. And again, today we've got Jonathan Schmitz with My Leadership Legacy. He's a coaching guy and very, very adept, coaches individuals and teams for sales. And we're just thrilled to have Jonathan be part of our team. So welcome again, Jonathan.
Thanks again for having me, Paul. Always a pleasure.
Well, listen, today, conversations is a pretty key element in life, whether it's your family or in your business or any other aspect of life. Nothing really happens without conversation. So I think we wanted to focus a little bit today on framing conversations and how to put context in a conversation in the framing that has every conversation go better. Does that sound like something that you could share some wisdom?
Yeah, absolutely. One, you're exactly right. Especially in kind of this post-COVID world, I guess, that we're currently living in. Human-to-human communication is obviously very, very important, but also, so much of what we're doing now is being moved digitally or via text or something like that. There's a lot less interpersonal communication than maybe there was 18 months ago. And so setting those conversations up for success and really communicating clearly is a skill set that I think never goes out of style and will always be in demand in a lot of ways, right? So what I wanted to talk about today is a concept I teach all my clients. I teach the sales teams that I train, something called pre-frames, right? And so framing the conversation, and really the entire premise of this is setting things up for success from the very beginning, right? People tend to feel in control whenever they understand and know what's coming next, even if they have no control over what actually does come next. It's a method that helped me tremendously in my sales career, but also what I found whenever I was networking or trying to introduce myself to people, or when I worked in a couple industries that had longer sales cycles, right? Where, it's something that might take 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks to actually close the deal from start to finish. Making sure that communication is clear is super important. And doing this allowed me to get a lot of potential objections and obstacles out of the way up front, right? And so, an example of this, whether you're trying to network and meet new people, trying to bring new people into business, catch up maybe with someone, you've got a new business that you think is a perfect fit for someone maybe you haven't seen in a while, high school, college, whatever it was, 5, 10 years, and really wanting a way to introduce that to them, but also not wanting them to feel like, hey, I'm just reaching out to you because I see you as a dollar sign. I've got commission breath and I'm just trying to sell you something in that particular arena, right? So this is super, super powerful. So essentially, just to kind of dive in here, what I find with most people whenever they start, the way we start off conversations, and just something as simple as speaking the unspoken and declaring our intention from the very beginning, is extraordinarily powerful, right? And really telling, especially if I'm leading a sales process or trying to say, hey, just so you know what to expect from me today, the first thing we're going to do is this, or my intention is X, then we're going to go over this. And at the very end of it, if it's something that makes sense for you, I'll just ask for a little bit of your feedback. If it's something that makes sense and seems like it's a good fit, then obviously we can talk a little bit about what it would look like for us to move forward. But first of all, I just want to catch up with you, see how you're doing, get to know you, your problems, kind of what you're looking for a little bit better. And then that'll help me understand if we're really a good fit and can actually serve each other or help in this way, right? Having a conversation like that, very simply at the front end of a conversation, makes everything else go extraordinarily smooth. It builds a ton of trust with our prospect or the person across from us, because now we said very openly, this is what I'm looking to do. These are the next steps that I'm looking to take. At the very end, if it makes sense, right? I'm not saying then at the end, I'm going to ask you to buy something from me. What I'm saying is at the very end, if it makes sense, based on your needs and what we offer, if there's a good fit there, then we'll have a conversation about what it would look like for us to work together and move forward, right? The nice thing about this, I always like to end pretty much every pre-frame that I have with somebody with the idea of like, hey, sound good or sound fair, something to that effect. It's a very loose form of agreement, but by getting that person to verbally respond and have a tie into something, what happens is as we go through that process, especially with sales, networking, et cetera, as we go through that process and we get to the end, the question at the end becomes, cool, do you like, based on everything you told me, I think we are a good fit. Would you agree? Do you like what you see so far? Something to that effect, right? We check in with that person and they say, yes, everything sounds great so far. Well, what happened now is we already set an agreement in place for the next step from here is to move forward, for us to do X, Y, Z now. So it's the only natural, logical progression for now we need to have a buying conversation about something. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people go in and they say, oh, cool, like they do their pitch for somebody and the prospect goes, oh, cool, thanks for the information. And they just leave, right? Versus getting that agreement on the front end, which is like, oh, cool. No, at the very end of this, we're going to talk about what it would look like for us to work together. They're literally giving you permission subconsciously and consciously. They're verbally giving you permission to continue and work through your sales process. in a way that feels very good, because you put it in that particular example, you're putting it contingent upon us being a good fit, everything making sense. Do you like what you see, etc. Now the next logical progression is that we need to move forward in some capacity. This also works with networking, right? Let's say you're reaching out to someone that you haven't seen in a few years. And, I know for some people, especially if you're, for example, a financial advisor, a lot of times they start off with warm network, friends, family, people that kind of are in their same area. Realtors do a similar thing. People in multi-level marketing and Cutco, where I came from, that's where we started, right? In a lot of ways, it can feel very awkward to reach out of the blue to someone you haven't spoken to in 5 to 10 years, especially when there's a business opportunity of some kind or something financial involved with it. And I think we've all probably been guilty of the one long lost friend reaches out to us 5 years later and we go grab coffee or lunch with them. And then before you know it, it's a pitch, right? And we're being sold something. And it's like, whoa. I was literally here to just catch up and have lunch with a friend. Right. And a simple conversation on the front end is super easy to have with that, something to the effect of, hey, I got this new opportunity. I just started doing X, Y, Z. Whenever I saw what they offered, you were one of the first people I thought of. Honestly, I'm really just, whether it's a great fit for you or not, I really thought that, I'm kind of using this as an excuse to catch up with people that I haven't seen or talked to in a long time. So regardless of if it's a good fit or not, I'd really love to just grab lunch, catch up with you, see how you're doing, go over a couple things. And of course, if it makes sense and something you're interested in, then we can talk about it. And if it's not something you're interested in, then that's totally fine too. But I'm kind of using this as an excuse to just catch up with people I haven't seen in a while. Right? Would you be open to grabbing lunch or coffee? That's a very different conversation than, the traditional, hey, I've got this amazing new opportunity. Can I take you to coffee? Or, hey, let's grab coffee. Haven't seen you in forever. And then before you know it, 5 minutes in, how's life? How's things? Okay, great. Well, I just started this new job and I want to tell you about it. You kind of blindside people in that sense. And what's really happening in that particular arena is you're actually really burning network equity with that person. It's not just a neutral experience. It's oftentimes a powerfully negative experience where that person's almost completely shut off to any other experience moving forward with you, because that one time you kind of blindsided them, versus very clearly establishing an intention, very clearly establishing this is exactly what I'm looking to do. It's totally okay if you don't get something. If it's not for you, that's perfectly fine. Really, I'm just using this excuse to catch up. And while we're catching up, I'd like to have a conversation with you about this to see if it's even a good fit, right? That's a very different place to come from than it is for, the other side, which is unfortunately, not to dog on network marketers, but I see a lot of MLM companies doing that. Even though they may have an incredible product or service, there's a lot of very, very high quality things in the direct sales space that are excellent products, but the networking way they go about it's a couple simple conversations on the front end would completely change the vibe and the way it's perceived by a lot of people.
Well, I think what you're talking about is, one is authenticity and
100%.
sharing clearly up front what you'd like to talk about. And even if you're reaching out to someone who hasn't been in your wheelhouse for 20 years, not blindsiding them. And I've noticed with some of the coaching clients I have, there kind of is that awkward moment where they're switching from what was personal to all of a sudden this business thing, and it becomes this big awkward bridge, and it doesn't usually work out so well. Right.
Yeah.
And I like to have a conversation that flows more naturally, including like, well, what are you up to lately? And then in that you can share your experience with what you're doing now. And right there, they're going to go, ooh, tell me more about that. Right. That's a much more natural flow that's truly authentic, as opposed to, hey, by the way, I'm going to sell you something now.
Yeah, 100%, and something as simple as just asking permission in those areas to hey, I'd really love to do this. Is it okay if I show this to you? Is it okay if we talk about this for, can you give me 10 minutes just so I can tell you about what I'm up to? That's a very different place to come from than hey, we're here now that I've got you cornered, we're going to talk about this, which is really where I think you're going with that.
When I've noticed,
really cool.
Even in my emails, I don't remember ever being told to do this. So probably I was coached to do this many years ago in all the sales training I did at Time Inc. But I put in my email what the next step is. If it's a business relationship, at the end of that email, I also let them know what the next action item is going to be.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, right? So especially for people that manage a longer sales cycle. So for example, I worked in roofing for a little bit, especially on the commercial roofing side of things. Projects can take 6, 8, 10, 12 months by the time all the moving pieces get done. Realtors, loan officers, people, financial advisors in some cases. Anyone that's managing a longer enterprise sales, for example, anyone that's managing a longer sales process, just overall, clearly stating, I've heard it before. It's kind of herding cats to a certain extent. When you're working with prospects or clients, if we're not very, very clear about, hey, we're on path A, and then from A we go to B, then from B to C, and remind people of that and clearly outline that from the beginning and provide space for feedback or questions, then that becomes, simply by doing that and outlining it consistently, it makes everything else significantly smoother, right? An example of this, I guess, just overall is just saying, look, like, hey, remembering that 2 is 1, 1 is none. If you tell somebody something twice, that's what they can say is one time. If you just mention it once in passing, they're probably going to forget it. It's probably not going to stick, right? There's a good chance it didn't. So clearly outlining, hey, so like you said, the next step from here is to do this. Once this happens and we get there, we reiterate it. So cool. So the great thing about where we're at, we got you pre-qualified. We already looked at some homes. The next step from here is going to be pick a home that you like and put an offer in on it. Just use real estate for an example. Put an offer on there. Once we get the offer, submitted, we go under contract. Once we're under contract, then we're going to need to get an appraisal done. We're going to need to do comps, these things, and just very clearly laying out A, then B, then C, then D, then E. Here's where we're at in the entire process. Here's where we came from. Here's where we are now. And here's the next thing that needs to happen from here, right? Something as simple as that. If you're ever leaving a conversation with a prospect, with a client or anybody, and they don't know very clear next steps about what to expect, when to expect communication from you, what they need to do there in the meantime, that relationship is potentially in trouble, right? No matter how good of friends you are with them, no matter what else is going on. So clearly outlining those steps is super powerful. Another point that I wanted to bring up as well, though, is what's funny about this is one of my big beliefs is you never just coach one aspect of a person, you always coach the entire person, right? So the same thing actually helps me tremendously when I'm married now, but whenever I was dating, actually helped me tremendously with a lot of things because it was super easy to just walk in and establish hey, here's my intention today, right? Hey, my intention today is to get to know you a little bit better. Would love to, kind of see who you are, see if there's any type of compatibility. If there is, great. I'd love to see where things go. And if it's just not a fit, then I'll make sure to tell you, right? And that can seem a little transactional with some people, but in sharing that with lots of people, especially, in my generation in particular, lots of single women, I can't tell you how many times like, oh, I wish men would just do that. Wish you'd just tell us exactly like, hey, this is what's going on, and vice versa, right? Like if it's not a good fit, then like, hey, it's just not a good fit. It just is what it is. Something as simple as like telling my wife, like, hey, here's what I'm doing for the day. I'm gonna be working, then I'm doing this, and I've got this and this going on. Well, then later on when she knows my schedule, she knows what's happening. And then when something comes up, she's not upset by it because I already told her what was going to happen there. Right.
Well, I think
it makes everything in life easier.
In the beginning, we talked a lot about how this applies to sales, but you're absolutely correct. This really applies to any conversation and any relationship you've got in your life, like with family and friends and others.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too, I was going to mention, the skepticism that I think that we're dealing with mainly and often caused by the media world and social media and so much, kind of that fake news. I think people are at heightened degrees of skepticism. And so giving them an authentic statement up front is actually not only refreshing, it almost opens the door for the conversation to happen. Whereas otherwise the skepticism will shut the door before you even started.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Right. And part of it too, I think sometimes people, especially in the sales world, can be afraid of having tough conversations, especially having very direct conversations with prospects, with clients, with something like that. What I find is that the times that I avoided the tough conversation, or I was afraid to say something because I wasn't sure I was going to be perceived, almost universally created more headaches and more problems for me down the road, or at the very least created anxiety on my part because what if this happens in the future, right? And there was that part of my brain that went there versus asking those tough questions up front. I mean, now one of my beliefs in business is that it has to be win-win or no deal, right? So even if it's something that would benefit the client, if it's, but is benefiting me at a high level, I'm not interested in doing business with that because it has to be a win-win for both parties involved. Right. And so by finding that, what I would call that sacred third, that actually that true middle ground, right, in a lot of ways for what needs to happen and where we need to move to, it becomes exponentially easier to have those conversations. And what I find is that even though you may lose out on a headache client or two here or there, the people that you do work with are so much better. They're so excited to work with you, use your service, whatever it is, because that you've had those tough conversations early. And now they're just your ideal client. And the cool thing is, especially when you start to understand referrals, which I'm sure we can talk about on another call, but when you start to really understand referrals and turning people into raving fans, that's the foundation of a business that's going to explode because people know people just like them, and your perfect clients know more perfect clients just like them as well.
That's right. Well, guys, hey, you can find more about Jonathan on our website, which is currykostial.com, or Jonathan can be found at myleadershiplegacy.com. And if you want to reach out to me, the contact information is there also at currycostal.com. Jonathan, thank you so much for this update today, and we'll have you back next month.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me, Paul.